Please welcome back Mark Jeffries.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good morning to all of you. My, that was a very loud voiceover, wasn't it? That got me awake. I was almost asleep in the wings. So, what a day we had yesterday. More on that in a moment. But first, I thought I would start with, another communication idea, especially linked to the fact that we're all here at this wonderful event, and one of the best opportunities that we have open to us at an event like this is the opportunity to network, to connect with each other, because when you meet someone new and you successfully import them into your valuable network, you never know where it's going to lead. Great things can happen from chance meetings, and I'm a real believer in that. But we have to be good at that whole networking 2.0, so I'm going to share an idea with you now. And this really is born of years of experience, because we've all been in a situation, have we not, where you're talking to somebody new, and at first it was quite interesting. You're chatting away and everything's good, and then suddenly you realize you're actually becoming quite bored, and you'd like to move on to somebody else. But they won't let you go. And they just keep on talking, and you're trapped, and no matter what you try to do, they won't shut up. And this is awful. And it's only been 10 minutes, but it starts to feel like 10 hours. And you stand there and you're thinking, gosh, I would welcome death over any more of this. So you should never be the person that traps somebody else. So here's my guidance for today. When you're talking with someone right here at Game Plan or any other event that you go to from here, I want you to open your eyes. Yesterday we talked about ears, today it's eyes. And watch every physical signal that streams off this person, because they'll tell you if they feel trapped by you, and you never want that to happen. So here are a couple of the signs. By no means is this comprehensive, but a few things to watch out for. If while you're talking to them, you're sharing your ideas, your stories, there's a slow crossing of the arms by this other person, this could be a sign that they no longer want to talk to you. Now, everything's got to be in context. A lot of people do this when they're cold. If the room is cold, maybe they're just a bit chilly. But if the room is warm and everyone else is fanning themselves, they're not cold. What they're doing is they're putting up their arms to say, I am defending myself against your boredom. That's what's happening. Let them go. Okay, what else? Look at the feet. Do you know the feet cannot lie? The feet give away so many signals. And when they're standing up, if the feet are pointing over there, that's where they'd like to go. Let them go first. What else? Their eyes constantly flitting over your shoulders, looking at other people. It's so rude. I don't care. We're doing things to suit them because we're trying to create great connections. If they're looking elsewhere, let them go first. Oh, and this is my favorite. The ultimate sign that your time is up is a combination of a slow hand clap, a sharp intake of breath, and the word anyway. I'll show you how it looks. You're talking. This is what they do. Anyway, that means please let me go because I'm going to shoot myself. So if you see any of these signs, you let them go first. You say, well, it's been lovely talking to you. Here's my business card. Let's stay in touch. It's wonderful, because then you import somebody new into your organization. Into your network, if you trap them, if they feel imprisoned by you, you'll never hear from them again. So a little bit of networking 2.0. All right, back to the business of the day. Yesterday, let's think about yesterday. Ram gave us the challenge to answer some key questions and really got us thinking. At the end of the day, Steve, if you think about it, gave us the ingredients and the conditions that lead us to some very creative and innovative answers. And then throughout the day, all of these wonderful panels, well, they shared with us their real-world methods, their ideas, what they actually did to meet with success. So a wonderful day, and of course now the conversation continues. So being prepared for the future is absolutely essential. You don't need me to tell you that. And there is no greater preparation than knowledge. And we have some great knowledge for you right now. The most comprehensive global study of B2B e-commerce has unearthed some fascinating insights that truly turn conventional wisdom on its head. So we're going to look at that right now. And with more on this, please welcome the senior analyst from Forrester, Andy Hoar.
Well, welcome everyone. I hope everybody here is awake and sober, necessarily in that order. Well, I was inspired yesterday by Ram Charan's sort of retro exposition, so much so that I decided to go a bit old school myself. So what I wanted to talk about today was how the world used to be and how the world is today. So up until recently, most of the people in this room, your customers found your product using that thing. How do you like that for a search engine, by the way? If you were unlucky or a small business, it's a good chance somebody found you one of these things, Yellow Pages. And probably, and yes, this is stolen from the hotel room, and probably the way they would go from this to an order is to use one of these things. So that was great for the longest time, but the world has changed because increasingly people are using, these devices, and increasingly, as Brian and others mentioned yesterday, these guys. So the problem is too many companies, unfortunately, are still optimized for this environment. Think about this as the call center. Think about this as these two things as sort of the product data and how it's stored and where you get it. Whereas increasingly, again, people are using these things. So is your business really optimized to do this kind of stuff? That's the key question. That's what we're going to address today. So as Mark mentioned, we were commissioned by Hybris to take a look at the world of B2B e-commerce as it is today and where we see it going forward. So when we see technology shifts like this, these are things that happen throughout history. This isn't the first time this has happened. It won't be the last time this has happened. So going way back to, some folks mentioned yesterday, back to Gutenberg, back in the 15th century, you had people using printing presses to make Bibles and books and the like. Well, it wasn't long after that they were cranking out today's modern-day equivalent of marketing collateral. 1892, this is Alexander Graham Bell actually making a long-distance phone call from New York to, of all places, Chicago. And of course, this gave us the wonderful world of telemarketing. And now, digital is having at least the same transformative effect that those technologies had, and arguably an even more profound effect. But there's just one problem. This happened 10 to 12 years ago in B2C. It's happening today in B2B, but again, the problem is it already happened in B2C. So as many speakers mentioned yesterday, this has raised the bar. So now B2B is facing this transformative effect with the legacy and history that B2C already exists. So I want to do a little experiment. I'm going to show you two websites. These are two real websites. Now I'm going to ask you which one is the B2C website and which one's the B2B website. So this is Nike. One of these is the B2C and one of these is the B2B. So show of hands. The one on the left, how many people think that's the B2B website? Okay, a few. How many people think it's the B2C website? We're all wrong. That's the B2B website, and that's the B2C website. So this is an example of a company that has actually already moved beyond that and has incorporated the B2C expectation into the B2B experience. In addition, we're now seeing internet heavyweights that have been dominant in the B2C space, notably Amazon and Google, now jumping into the B2B space. So not only do we have this B2C expectation, but as many people mentioned yesterday, we now have these B2B guys, or B2C guys, who are also entering the fray. And we talked quite a bit about Amazon Supply. I'm sure we'll talk about this later today as well. I wanted to mention Google Shopping for Suppliers because I didn't hear anybody mention that one yesterday. So the good news is, unlike Amazon Supply, Google Shopping for Suppliers is not intermediating in transactions. So it's not a direct competitor with the folks in the audience today. But what Google Shopping for Suppliers is doing is leveraging Google's great strength, which is its search engine, and has basically developed a lead referral system. Now, hard to say whether it's going to stay like that or it's going to evolve into something where they actually intermediate a transaction. Kind of doesn't matter at this point. What does matter is that anytime a company like Amazon and a company like Google are now in the space you're operating in, you would be horribly remiss if you didn't at least pay attention to that fact and expect frankly, disruption. Thrown also into the mix, and there was a lot of discussion about this yesterday, is we now have people using smartphones, like my little smartphone right there, and also tablets. So throw this all into a big pot, stir it up, and what you have today is sort of the swirling dynamics of a new marketplace that B2B is entering into. So it was in the context of this that Hybris actually commissioned Forrester to do a study and really report back on a global basis how it is that B2B e-commerce is operating today and how we anticipate it operating going forward. And as many folks have mentioned, there's some really interesting insights, some things that will probably surprise you about what we learned. So there's actually a copy of this in your bags, but let me just tell you a little bit about what we did for this survey and why it was really a seminal piece of research. So we surveyed 717 B2B companies on a global basis. So we looked at companies in EMEA, so Europe, Middle East, Africa, North America, so United States and Canada, and we looked at companies in the Asia Pacific region, so Japan, Korea, and China. And what we did was we compared the results because half of that group had not sold online yet, and the other half had. So what it came down to is 353 companies on a global basis that are currently selling online, and the rest were not. And we broke it up so that there were at least 100 selling online in each of these regions and 100 that were not selling online in each of the regions. So long story short, we looked at behavior of companies that are pre-selling and companies that are currently selling on a global basis. To date, nobody's done anything like that. Plus, as the folks at Hybris will attest to, we spent a great deal of time thinking through how we would survey these folks, what kind of questions we'd ask them, and we asked them a great many questions that I know, because I'm in the industry, nobody has actually done. So here are the three sort of key findings. There are plenty of these findings. And by the way, we looked at it again on a global basis, so we aggregated the results. We are actually able, some point down the road, to dig deeper into each of the regions and report the results, because we have large enough sample sizes to actually cross-tab all these numbers by just companies in the Asia Pacific region, EMEA, or North America. But for purposes of this research, and so we could fit it on 10 to 12 pages, and you weren't reading documents and documents of material, we've really kind of averaged all together across a global stage. So three key findings. One, self-service tools are fundamentally changing the way B2B customers interact with their companies. I'm going to go through this in a moment, but focus on the word fundamental. Not marginally, not incrementally, fundamentally. Two, selling online and on mobile represents a significant new opportunity for B2B companies. I didn't say small new opportunity, I said significant new opportunity. And lastly, and this is a conclusion that we sort of drew from all the survey research. We also talked to a number of companies in depth, and fair to say that for companies that are waiting too long to implement this, you can do anything, but you run a very high risk, because what we're starting to see in certain industries, and I think to some extent Grainger is a good example of this, they're starting to lap the competition. They're so far ahead of other businesses. In fact, a quick story, I was meeting with a company that is actually pre-selling right now, so they aren't even selling online. And they compete in Grainger's marketplace. So everybody knows Grainger's about 35, 38% of their business online, going to 50 within just a couple of years. And this company, which is competing directly against Grainger, in fact, they have branches and the whole deal as well. They're selling 0% online today, and they have a goal of selling 5% within 5 years. So how do you have a company that within 5 years will be selling 50% of their business online, competing against a direct competitor that within 5 years will be at 5% of its business online? That is not a sustainable competitive model. One company is clearly farther ahead of the other. So I want to talk a little bit about what we learned in terms of the driving force here, and it's really the B2B customer behavior, because at the end of the day, as many people said yesterday, and as a truism, What's driving what you do for your work every day is what your customers want. Again, we all know this, but it's amazing to me how many companies forget this little fact. So let's take a look at this quickly. So I said earlier that we saw in the research that it's a fundamental change that we're seeing here in terms of the way customers interact. A couple of points here. So 62% of the B2B companies we surveyed said that the way in which they interact with their customers has fundamentally changed. Two quick points beyond that. What we also saw, and you'll see this thematically through the research, the longer B2B companies sold online, so we cross-tabbed by whether they've been selling for 5 years or longer, or 5 years or less, and the more they sell online, so we cross-tabbed by which companies are selling more than 25% of their, or doing more than 25% of their business online. So not only is this on its face the case, but the longer you sell online and the more you sell online, the more pronounced and disproportionate the positive results are. So these numbers go up even higher. So if I showed you the crosstabs for this particular finding, it would be in the 70s and the 80s. So the point here is, for companies that have been doing this for a while, and for companies that are doing a lot of this, these numbers go even higher. So keep that in mind as we're going through. So this was an interesting kind of surprising fact. So we asked companies, to what extent are you going to continue publishing your catalog? And what we learned was that nearly 70% across the globe of B2B companies said they're going to stop, completely stop, publishing a print catalog within 5 years. And actually it was, remember from EMEA, the number was even higher. It was in the high 70s in EMEA. And North America was about at the mean, and in Asia Pacific, because I think they're still earlier to e-commerce, it was lower. But the reality is, this is a surprising statistic. Stop publishing something they've been publishing for 100 years. What's also surprising is this last point, a counterpoint, which is that on a global basis, 31% said they will never stop publishing a catalog. What we found out in the research was that these companies said they're never going to stop publishing a catalog are using the catalog in a fundamentally different way. So they're still going to publish the catalog, but the catalog is getting smaller, more focused, and becoming more of a piece of marketing collateral, which is what we've seen in what other industry? B2C. So Williams-Sonoma still sends out catalogs, right? Even though, as we learned yesterday, they do $1 billion online. That's how people order. But how they research is still based on this catalog that people receive now as marketing collateral. So I think we'll see, and people who know me in the room know I often say this, if you want to see the future of B2B e-commerce, with some exception, look at the present and recent past of B2C, and a lot of the same trends carry over, and this is certainly one of them. Another surprising statistic, 50% of B2B companies we surveyed said that their customers are using B2C sites and B2B, what do we call them, B2B-like B2C sites. So Amazon Supply, Google Shopping for Suppliers, sites like that, to research and buy products online. So a little bit higher in terms of the consumer websites, 52%, 48%. But look at the disagree here. So it's twice the number of companies said that their customers are using these sites as not. If we'd done this survey a couple years ago, I guarantee these numbers would be a lot lower. And if we do this survey again in a couple years, I guarantee these numbers are going to be much higher. So again, B2C spillover, clear evidence of it. Also, and Brian mentioned this yesterday, about the majority of B2B customers are now using mobile devices to research and buy products online. Slightly higher for tablets. Obviously, it's a larger form factor. But at any rate, more than 50% across the board for all these B2B companies. And by the way, as we all know, the tablet didn't exist 3 years ago. 3 years ago. I mean, I have socks that are older than that, and the tablet didn't exist 3 years ago. It's an incredible thing. And also, the little iPhone there is only 6 years old. I used to do a presentation where I'd say, look at what changed in the last 5 years. This is last year. And I would show, the iPhone, and I'd talk about all the retailers, for example, that are no longer in business, like Circuit City, and so on and so forth. And even I would be on stage going, that's only 5 years. I mean, what were we all doing 5 years ago? Not things that are probably radically different from what we're doing right now, but look at how this has upended and distorted the marketplace. Just imagine what it's going to happen in the next couple of years, if this is what we've seen in the last couple of years. So why does this mobile stuff matter? Well, I ran across this very interesting statistic recently. This was done by Cisco, who monitors, obviously, network traffic. And what they said is back in 2011, of business internet traffic, I don't know exactly how they do that, but they figured out business internet traffic as opposed to consumer internet traffic. 4% was mobile in 2011. They estimate by 2016, 26%. And actually, this matches up a bit with statistics we've seen at Forrester, which is that 25% of the people in this room are now using tablets on a daily basis for work. And I bet the number is probably even higher in this room, but 25% of all corporate employees are now using tablets. Again, the tablet didn't exist in the year 2010. So, what does this mean for a company like a company here or outside of the walls of this building who are manufacturers, for example? I think we've talked a lot about distributors, and frankly, from my perspective, if you're a distributor and your job is to add value to a transaction between a manufacturer and a customer, and you aren't selling online, unless you're selling in the defense industry where everything is top secret, or you sell some very arcane product that requires humans only to intermediate transaction, not selling online is an existential threat to your business. So we've talked a lot about distributors, but I want to just take a moment and talk about a manufacturer. And hopefully a manufacturer that's not in this room, because I had to go looking for these guys. This is a small manufacturer in Washington that makes industrial dehumidifiers. All right, so I'm sure everybody's got an industrial dehumidifier at home. The one I've circled there is a $1,500 product. This is the thing that, you know, companies go and buy when there's flooding, and they put these things in your office space, and they suck out all the water and hopefully recover the premises. So they sell this through Grainger and various companies, but $1,500, this is a $50 million business in Washington. It's part of a bigger company as well, but $50 million business. So up until recently, this was the state of their world. They're a brand manufacturer at the production level. They manufacture that industrial dehumidifier. Goes through standard offline distribution. You know, you got Fastenals, your Graingers, McMaster cars. This is not an exhaustive list, but you sort of get the flavor here. To a buyer like a Service Master, who are the people that kind of descend upon flooded zones or clean big properties, and they need a ton of these industrial dehumidifiers. What's interesting, though, is just recently, so in the last couple of years, this has really changed for a company like Dry-Ease. Invariably, and this is probably not due to the presence of e-commerce, this probably would have happened anyway, but it doesn't change the fact that at least it's a correlation, maybe not a causation, but it's a reality, is now they're competing with private label. So this is a company, this is Grainger's product, by the way. Their very own distributor is manufacturing a private label product, actually private label, but it has a brand called the Dayton brand of industrial dehumidifiers. Right? So you've got a brand manufacturer competing now against its own distributor at the production level. So we start with that. Same customer, Service Master. But here's the world now that they exist in. And by the way, this is not comprehensive. This should just give you a flavor for how their world has changed. So I was going to do my John Madden here and start writing on the board and talk about how, you know, the things are moving from place to place. But here's the reality. Again, not comprehensive. This is frankly something I did the other day as I was thinking through this, and I confirmed that both of these products are in fact available at all of these sites. And some of them, you know, were surprising to me. And I don't spend my evenings doing this stuff, but I must admit, in a geeky sort of way, it was kind of fun to go and find, like, it's like a mystery, and you're like, I can't believe they're selling this product against themselves on this website. So if you ever have any spare time and you're looking for something fun to do, you might want to try this with your own products. So now, let me just give you a brief explanation of the mess you see up here. So now you got a brand manufacturer who's selling through, believe it or not, that industrial dehumidifier is available at Sears. That was a surprise to me. So B2C offline, B2C online. Now they're also, of course, available in the middle there with Fastenal, Grainger, McMaster car, but you'll notice it says now online and offline distribution. And then over on the right-hand side, that product, the Dry-Ease industrial dehumidifier, is now also available on pure play distribution websites. So these are only websites that don't have branches or stores or anything. They're just websites that specialize in selling products like this. And by the way, the one Zorro Tools, Anybody know whose website that is? Granger. And of course, we have Amazon Supply, and there's a company called globalindustrial.com, which is another one of these sort of pure play websites. Again, we have Amazon Supply, which I don't want to diminish that, and then a company called DrillSpot, which is sort of like a blogger sort of website. So now, if you're DryEase and you want to sell to ServiceMaster, there are all these ways across multiple channels that you can get there, and you're competing against your own online distribution partners with their product, selling through pure play sites that are competing with you. It's just amazing. I want to highlight two quick things here. The red lines. So I just talked about how now Granger's own product is being sold through pure play sites, competing directly with its own channel partner here. But interestingly enough, and this is the big question, the last red line, is DryEase going to start selling direct to a ServiceMaster? We've heard lots of different ideas around this. They don't know. I actually happened to talk to them, just out of curiosity. They don't know yet. I'm willing to make a prediction. Within 3 to 5 years, they will be. Because they're going to have to. And you know why we know this? Because that's what happened in B2C. And for the very same dynamic reasons. B2C websites said for the longest time, we're never going to upset the channel. We're not going to do it. Companies like Procter & Gamble, we're not doing it. Walmart's too important to us. Procter & Gamble is selling online today to the tune of almost $5 billion in the next couple of years. So it is invariably the case that these guys are going to sell online. So I would challenge you to think about this. Is this something that you thought was never possible? You thought we're just not going to do this, and now you're looking at this reality and thinking, you know what? We might. So I mentioned, too, there's a significant new opportunity here. Let me just walk you through some of the statistics we have here. I'm going to hit you with a lot of numbers, forewarned here, and we'll try and go through them, and then you can just ignore the ones that aren't interesting to you. But we know this, and you've probably seen our Forrester forecast around B2B, more than twice the size of B2C. And I'm still amazed, even though this came out over a year ago, how many people are surprised by this, including some of my colleagues at Forrester. And Brian knows I used to joke about, Brian and I used to work together at Forrester. He knows I used to joke about B2B. It was sort of the thing that people would say, oh yeah, B2B, whatever. B2C is where it's at, right? So a friend of mine put this one together, and I thought it was kind of funny. This is how I now characterize this very same marketplace. The tables have turned. Okay, so here's the barrage of numbers. So I know it's early in the morning. This is probably not going to be fun at times, but I think these are important, and we can talk about this later as well. Okay. So we asked these B2B companies, okay, what are your fastest growing channels? Amazingly enough, the fastest growing channel for a lot of these B2B companies, because a lot of them also sell B2C, they must have sold B2B. That was a requirement to be in the survey. So we know that much, but it doesn't mean they can't have also sold B2C. So number one was actually selling direct to consumer. It was 38%. But then we asked them selling through offline VARs, blah, blah, blah. I'm just explaining why the numbers don't seem that high, because there are like 10 options. But selling B2B direct online was the number two listed one. So 16% there is the number two. Everything else is in the low single digits. So everybody here says in the next 12 months, 3 years, and 6 years, and it increases as you can see. They believe their online B2B channel is going to go twice as fast as their offline B2B channel. We also saw, and this is sort of a bringing it all together thing, that online-only customers are more active than offline-only customers. So we did something interesting in the research. We actually asked, to what extent do you agree with this statement? And we isolated online-only customers and offline-only customers. In fact, we also looked at multi-channel versus offline-only. So the difference here is online-only is literally you only buy online. Offline-only is literally you only buy offline. Multi-channel means you buy in both channels. So multi-channel, by the way, and you'll hear me say this a couple of times, turns out to be far and away your best customers. We saw this in B2C, and we're seeing it now in B2B. And I'll say at the end that if you do one thing, if you just only do one thing after having seen this presentation, and you have the ability to do this at work, Make your online-only customers and your offline-only customers multi-channel customers. And I didn't say let them happen to be, I said make them. And I'll tell you why here in a moment. So online-only customers, more active than offline-only customers. And here are the statistics. So we asked questions like, to what extent do you agree with the statement? Online-only customers are more likely to order outside of core catalogs or core categories. 57% said yes. 10% said no. So we're talking 5 to 1 here. They believe online-only customers are more likely to order outside core categories. 2, they're also more likely to add additional items to an order. Again, we all know this is sort of the mother's milk of online selling. It's not necessarily the product that people come to buy. It's the average order value and the ticket size. And one of the things we've seen about online is that it's more effective, and I'm talking about this in a second, much more effective way of cross-selling and upselling customers. It's something that, frankly, offline is deficient in. They're also more likely to order in bulk. Buy repeat orders. This is a big one. So what you can do online that's much harder to do offline is you can just lock people in. They buy the same thing on a seasonal basis. They buy the same thing every couple of months. For whatever reason, you can lock them in more online. People are far more likely to do this online, 57%, again, to like 8, 9%. And also more likely to order at a higher frequency. This is very important. It's a lot easier to order online, isn't it? You can do it at 3 o'clock in the morning. You can click a button and say, order that, done. I bought some on Amazon the other day. I timed it. It took me 3 seconds. And then lastly here, they're also more likely to switch from one brand to the other due to a promotional offer. Now, we've seen a lot of this in B2C. This is a fairly new concept in B2B, but guarantee you it's coming. You're going to be offering people promotional, in fact, we're doing a survey, which I want to talk quickly about at the end here, with Internet Retailer Magazine of B2B companies on a global basis. Many people in the room will probably hear about this because I think we're going to email you about it because we want you to participate. What we've found is that one of the questions that a number of people I sort of consulted with said I needed to add, which I was resistant to add, was coupon codes and promo codes. Now, who would have predicted a couple of years ago that now B2B websites would be offering coupon codes? But I got pushed by people in this audience to add that to the questionnaire. Again, it's coming. We also saw in the research that online-only customers, again, compared to offline-only customers, have higher average order values. Now, this is interesting because it wasn't significantly higher, not significantly higher on the face of it. So 37% versus 31%, so a plurality, but it's only net plus 6, said their online-only customers are more likely to have higher AOVs than offline. The point here is it's higher. Not significantly higher. But remember I said earlier that the longer people sell online and the more people sell online, the more positive and disproportionate the results are? Great example. That number goes to 52%. So it starts to widen as you ask people who have been doing this longer and sell more, hey, well, how do these people compare, 5 years down the road versus 5 years ago? How do they compare their AOVs to people offline? And it starts to spread. So again, another good reason to be selling online if you're not. People down the road living in the future have seen what the results are. Also, I mentioned this. This, to me, was the most surprising finding in the survey. This is the one that kind of jumps out to me the most. And it's about, we asked, to what extent do you agree that it's easier to reach customers with cross-sell and upsell offers online versus offline? 54% said it's easier to do it online than it is offline. And this is something I think is often overlooked by companies who say, well, selling online, it's going to upset the channel. Yeah, we're not really convinced. This is irrefutable. If you sell online, you're going to have a much easier and more compelling way to cross-sell and upsell people. And as we talked about earlier, it's all about increasing the basket size, B2C and B2B. This is the way to do it, using algorithms like Ron mentioned yesterday, wisdom of the crowds, recommendations. These are all things that we all now use on Amazon. As somebody joked yesterday, people like this also like this. That's really hard for an offline sales rep to know. You might take the order for the cylinder, but you don't know exactly what the complementary items are for 1,000 or 1,000,000 SKUs like that catalog has in it. You can't know these things. Algorithms can. And then loyalty. This is the last one we asked about. And we also learned, also kind of a surprising finding, that B2B companies believe they can more effectively build loyalty online versus offline. This is a sticking point because I've had many companies ask me this question. Yeah, that's great about the AOV. Yeah, that's great about, the opportunities with this and that, but I'm worried about loyalty because I know my offline customers are loyal. And if I move them online, I'm losing control. Well, first of all, you're not moving them online. They're moving online. So you have to be online. So let's just put that to bed right now. But there's a resistance to doing that. Well, these numbers sort of bear this out now. They believe, 44% believe they can more effectively build loyalty online versus offline. And again, over time, longer you do this, more you sell online, the number jumps to 65% for B2B companies that are doing more than 25% of the business online. This is the last bit of heavy data, and then we'll transition to some other stuff here. We've talked a lot about self-service tools. This is the way in which you deliver this to people, right? You have to build a website using an e-commerce platform suite and deliver it to your customers. So we asked, do your customers even want this kind of stuff? And we weren't really surprised by the findings, but we wanted to ask that question. Do your customers want self-service tools online? 62% said their customers want self-service tools to research online, versus only 10% who said they don't. Again, this is all intuitive to the people in this room, but if you're looking to persuade people back in the C-suite, I don't know, how do you get around this number? If they say, no, our customers don't want to do it, they're happy calling Bob. Bob walks through the catalog, uses the old school search engine, he finds it, he completes the deal between the hours of 9 and 5, everybody's happy. Well, they also want to purchase. I switched this one up a little bit, and this is a surprising finding to me. How many people want to purchase on smartphones? They want the ability to use a smartphone to make these purchases. This wouldn't have surprised me in B2C. This does surprise me in B2B, to be honest. But we saw this pretty consistently. So they want tools to buy stuff online, research online, but they also want to be able to research and buy on mobile phones and tablets. And then the last thing that we asked about was customer support. Believe it or not, these guys also want customer support on these devices, to the tune of 58% online, 52% on a smartphone. Okay, I think that's it with the big data. So what does all this mean? Well, clearly I think I've demonstrated there's revenue upside to selling online around AOV and loyalty and all sorts of stuff, all the numbers we just went to. I didn't talk much about this in the interest of time, but there's also cost savings. And we've seen this in other research that I've done as well, including, and I'll talk about this in a second, there's also a class of customers that we heard in the research and we've heard in our interviews that are really only profitable online. Because humans are expensive, right? And you can't put Bob on the phone to talk to a guy who buys one item every 3 years. There's just not enough revenue associated with that. But when you're supporting them online, what's the marginal cost of supporting one guy buying one item every 3 years? It's incrementally zero, basically. So you can actually attract a whole new type of customer online that you can't really support offline. I mentioned loyalty. There's also loyalty benefits and loyalty gains associated with bringing people online and selling them online. And by the way, like I said earlier, these numbers are even higher for multi-channel. And something we didn't actually talk about, and I noticed some people touched on yesterday, but I want to hit on again here, is selling online actually enables this. Now, for people who've done this before, when you open up a new market, you have to send people there, you've got to create demand, you've got to set up relationships. I know from other research I've done, there are B2C companies that have opened up sales channels in countries like Japan and China by just selling on Tmall, which is a big online mall in China. And because people in China are familiar with the Tmall brand, that imputes credibility to the brand that's selling on Tmall. So these companies in the B2C space are not setting up sales offices, they're not hiring people, they're not doing anything in China, but they're selling in China because they just put it on Tmall. A lot of opportunity here for B2B companies as well. And then lastly, category specialization. There's an interesting story about a company called Akron Hardware. They're a company in Akron, Ohio. They started selling, on Main Street in Akron back in the 1920s, I believe. the guy who would go and get the wrench, what have you. In the 1980s, the big box guys came along and they said, hey, we're done. What are we going to do? We can't compete with Lowe's and Home Depot, Walmart. But one thing they noticed by looking at their sales is that people use them for doorknob purchases. For some reason, people love buying doorknobs from these guys. They had a fairly broad range within the category, and so they decided to specialize in selling doorknobs. So if you get a chance to go to their website, which isn't the greatest, but if you go to their website, you'll see that they really specialize in selling doorknobs. And they sell these doorknobs all around the world to the point above. So selling online enables you to specialize in a category. So you can go narrow line versus broad line. So these are all considerations, especially if you have multiple product categories and thousands of SKUs. I can tell you in the research, some of the companies we talked to said, and I kid you not, they said, we discovered new markets by just putting things on websites. It's a great way to find out who wants your product, isn't it? Just put it up and see who comes. And they said, we've learned there are applications for our products that we hadn't even considered. Like rubber tires being used by boating companies and docks. That's something we see you think Goodyear made rubber tires for that? But there's all sorts of applications of things like that if you just put it up there, find out what people want. Like Paul Miller said yesterday, he goes, it doesn't matter what I think, what matters is what do they think. So, there's a lot of rosy stuff here. There's a lot of, possibility and lots of upside. I think I've demonstrated that through the research. But like everything in the world, there are always challenges. And so I want to highlight a few of the challenges here, which are also mentioned in the white paper. If you're going to go global, you're going to have to localize. All these companies that I talked to that were selling on Tmall, they weren't selling on Tmall in English. So you're going to have to, find a way to put that in local language, support local currencies. Fortunately, there are a lot of companies out there and a lot of platforms that are capable of supporting that. Not a couple years ago they weren't, but now they can. Also, it requires a robust partner ecosystem to do this. You can't just decide, hey, we're going to go sell something and let's just use Amazon Marketplace and do it. Although it's not a bad idea. You're going to need robust partner ecosystem. And this is hard work to do this. But it's necessary. And fortunately, I think there are a lot of companies actually sponsoring this and other conferences like that specialize in doing this. So you're going to need a systems integrator. We call them global commerce service providers who can help you with customer segmentation and the like. It's not as simple as just plugging something into the back of the machine and suddenly stuff starts selling, right? You're going to need people who specialize in certain things. And again, fortunately, all of that ecosystem has now evolved to the point where these people are readily available and they have experience, which is important. And of course, I mentioned this earlier, and I can't not mention it again. You got the Amazon supplies and the Googles of the world, and people are getting into this space, and they're bringing with them, the most amazing thing about Amazon supply was that day one, 163 million people could log into that website and buy stuff. I talked to clients of ours who logged in the first day and actually bought stuff because they just wanted to see if it would work. And I had people report back to me, it was really easy. Because I bought that thing on Amazon in 3 seconds. They were buying bolt fasteners in 5 seconds. And I said, can your site deliver that? And they're like, not even close. All right, so what do you do? I've talked a little bit about, the world, the state of the world, how things are trending, what research we've seen to support this on the good side, the bad side, some of the challenges that you're going to face doing this. Now let's sort of, in our remaining time here, talk about what the next steps are. Again, this is highly attenuated. We could spend days on this, but let me give you a sense for how we think about it. So we at Forrester have something we call a POST methodology. And it stands for people, which is identifying key customer segments. If we do it again, we probably would call it a COST, but C for customer, but that doesn't sound great, you know what I mean? So we call it people. And I think very important, and this is something I've been telling a lot of clients, you've got to envision the world 3 years down the road. Not 5 years, that's too far, not 1 year, 3 years. And have a meeting, quite literally. Call together your IT people, your marketing people, your sales people, what have you. Bring them into a room and say, okay, how do we think our world for our customers is going to be in the year 2016? Do a little visioning exercise here. You think it's corny, but you walk out of that room, it'll change the way you think. Because if you had done this in 2010 when the iPad came out, somebody might have said, what if people start using these things? At least let's account for it. But there were plenty of companies who weren't even thinking about this 3 years ago. And look how much this has changed things. Again, picture your customer's world in 2016, work your way backwards. 2, set some objectives. That's what the O stands for. Make them clear and align with corporate goals. 3, strategies. I developed a research methodology I call active strategies, and I always struggle to remember what this means. So active means assigned, calibrated, time-bound, integrated, vetted, and executable. And what that means is you take something that, like, put up a website. That's the strategy, right? Or that's the objective. That's not actionable. But when you apply an active framework to it, it takes it from that to these 3 groups are going to do this by this date with this outcome according to this schedule, what have you. But it makes something that seems otherwise generic very specific. And then lastly here, and in this order, technology. The T comes last. It's a post, not a tops, or somebody told me once, stop. It's not that. The T comes last. You've got to do the first 3 before you can do the last one. This may frustrate vendor friends of ours, but the ones who are smart know that if you do this first, you got to do the other ones anyway. I've had plenty of companies actually call me, and this is no joke, saying, hey, we just bought a platform a couple months ago. It can do all these things. It's not doing all those things. And I say, why isn't it doing those things? They're like, well, because, and then they finally confessed they didn't have a plan. The IT guy bought the technology because they knew the guy and made the vendor happy, but then they've got a pig and a poke and they don't know what to do with it. I see a lot of nodding heads and smiling faces. Everybody in this room has probably been through some version of this before. That's why you got to start with the first 3. And I guarantee you, if you do the first 3, the last one will change from what you thought it was going to be. So I want to just talk very quickly as we're sort of wrapping up here around the first part, customer segmentation. So I wrote a research piece about this around very, very, very oversimplified segmentation. Again, you need to do this within your own company, with your own methodology. We can help you. Other people can help you too. But this is the way I would do it if I were you, starting with just your existing customer base. Divide them up into frequency of spend and size of spend. So this is, for the marketing folks in the room, this is a version of the RFM model, minus the recency part. So RFM stands for recency, frequency, and monetary. Take out the recency for a moment. This is the frequency and the monetary piece multiplied together. These are your best customers. The high-spending, high-frequency customers. No surprise, they typically operate in online and offline channels. I call these your key accounts. And what you want to do with these guys is delight them with service and reward them with loyalty. The 2 upper left-hand corner and lower right-hand corner, these are the kind of mixed, either high spend or low spend, high frequency or low frequency. You can sort of see how we characterize those accounts. But in the interest of time, I want to jump to this. Remember I mentioned earlier about the internet opening up a new channel for customers that you can acquire that you wouldn't otherwise be able to acquire? This, for lack of a better characterization, are those people. I call them the dormant accounts, or the low spend, low frequency accounts. And what these guys want to do is you want to activate them. This is the company that comes to you once every 3 years and makes a small purchase. One warning, if you're tempted to think these are just small companies that make small purchases, that's probably the case most of the time. It is not the case all of the time. I've actually worked with companies who have done some digging and they've found, oh, wait a minute. These are actually really large companies that are doing this. They just happen to buy one product from us. They don't even know about the rest of our product line, or they buy that from somebody else. Huge opportunity to upsell and cross-sell them, which again, you can do very easily online, harder to do offline. But this is a group of customers you can get that are very difficult to support and hard to find in an offline environment. Last piece on the technology. So we just launched this. We call this our wave. Sorry for all the text here, but it's just a screenshot. We just launched this 2 days ago. So on the technology side, we actually went through 66 criteria and we ranked all the top vendors. Hybris is certainly in the ranking as well. We looked at all of them, and again, it's fairly comprehensive, and the guys at Hybris will tell you, this is a 6 to 9 month undertaking. So it takes a long time. It's not like we just kind of went into a room, threw some stuff against the wall and said, here, let's do this. This is thorough, methodical, and very deep and detailed. And so if you're interested in this, let me know about it. But when you get to the technology phase, we can help you sort of figure out which vendor's right for you. And then just lastly, all that stuff, the strategy stuff around customer segmentation and that technology piece, they fit into these two pieces of my B2B e-commerce playbook. Not to be confused with the Hybris playbook at the Game Plan event. And we had the name first, by the way. But this is something that all Forrester analysts are now doing, is we're putting together a comprehensive sort of view of a particular space. I've written everything but the vision chapter, so any one of these things you can get a copy of, and it'll show you our best thinking around how to approach this for your particular company. So I leave you with a couple of thoughts here around what it's going to take to get from here to there. 4 key tenets. 1, you got to invest in a world-class customer experience. Notice I didn't say world-class technology. Notice I didn't say world-class strategies. Customer experience. That's where it starts. That's where it ends. 2, you got to prepare for competition from across a broader ecosystem. If you just look at, I get this a lot when I talk to clients. I'm like, okay, so how do you think you compare? They go, well, against my competitors, I'm great. I'm like, how good are your competitors? They're not good. So I said, in other words, you're the tallest dwarf in the room, right? And they go, yeah, great. Except there are a bunch of 7-footers playing basketball down the hallway who are coming over to your court, and they're going to play pickup, and they're going to kill you. So compare yourself against a higher standard, a B2C standard, not against the other people who are just as confused as you are. 3, mobile. Now, I don't really need to say more than that. It's changed the way people buy online, and it's creating whole new use cases. Grainger will tell you that when they launched their tablet app, they discovered a use case they didn't expect. It revitalized their physical branches, because then people at the job site, chucking the truck, as they say, or daying in the van, is able to order something on their tablet and go pick it up at a Grainger store. Oh, interesting. Now we've got a multi-channel customer, right? It's perfect, because they can be at lunch, figure out they got to have this part, they can order it on their tablet or their smartphone, as Brian was mentioning yesterday about his plumber, and then go pick it up in the store on the way home, and then come to the job site the next day without having to wait for an overnight shipping, if it even comes, and go to and fix the problem right away. So, it reinforces the 1 and 1 equals 3 metaphor. And then lastly, create omni-channel customers. Like I said, don't wait for them to come along. Don't kind of sort of be interested in them. Create them. Take the online guys, give them an offline touch, whatever that amounts to, a phone call every quarter or what have you. And take the offline guys and give them an online experience, which I think is the point of this conference. So on that note, I'm going to put my stupid picture up there. And in our remaining 1 or 2 minutes, if we want to take a couple of questions. I know I'm sitting on a couple of panels this morning too, so I'm sure a lot of questions will come up then. But I don't know, Mark, if we have time for questions or if we move to the next segment? 2 minutes. 2 minutes for questions. So if people have quick questions and easy questions, I'll be happy to take them.
And I have the microphone, so raise your hand and I'll come right to you. And then we've made it easy for you the last day, just text it in, but now you have to use your voice. Is there a question for Andy? I think you've given them so much to think about, Andy.
I answered all the questions. You guys want to do poverty next?
Oh, no, look, we got hands. I'm on my way. It's my morning workout. Where were those hands? Okay.
In the research that you did, Andy, were you only looking at customers who were going to online websites, or were you also including customers who did e-commerce electronically in other ways?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I'm having a little problem hearing you.
When you did your research, were you only looking at customers who were doing business with these suppliers and manufacturers, whatever? Were you only looking at people who were doing business online in a website environment? Or were you also looking at people who were using or other methods of electronic business, like EDI or
Yes.
or some other kinds of connections?
Yeah, very good question. Actually, I get asked that question a lot. Remember my dog thing with the big dog, the small dog, 559, 252? Yeah. That, actually, for purposes of clarity and because I just don't think EDI is e-commerce, my personal opinion, we've excluded EDI from all of this analysis. So if you're doing EDI above and beyond this, my 15-second philosophy on EDI is it's an ordering mechanism. It is not e-commerce. You can't create an experience. You can't do cross-sell, upsell. It's great. I call it the superhighway of orders. It's great for putting somebody on the highway, going 100 miles an hour to the other end and completing a purchase. I've done actually a lot of research recently for clients around, how do we move people from an EDI environment to an e-commerce environment? The answer to that is if they're already hooked on EDI, it's like switching drugs. Let them stay on the heroin. It's not worth it. The investment's too high. The behavior change is too much. But by the way, there just aren't that many companies in a B2B environment that, for whom e-commerce is appropriate, that EDI is also appropriate. So if they're already doing EDI, let them stay in EDI. It's an oversimplification. But for all these smaller companies that either are on the verge or they're big distributors who don't have EDI, in other words, I would sort of not put new customers on EDI, but I wouldn't take the old customers off. Oversimplified answer, but in the interest of time, there you go. Okay, we're done.